Hi everyone. I saw that some people viewed my last video. Thank you all for that. And so I figured that maybe I would do another one. This one is probably flawed from the beginning in concept because I want to kind of ask a poll question of you, and there probably won't be a lot of comments. And so it's possible, maybe that could be a good thing. It's possible somebody might win the poll, like 2 votes to nothing or something, because there just aren't that many people. But the question that I thought that I would ask is, who is the most important conservative? All right, so here we go. Who is the most important conservative? Who is the most important conservative? So I want to start by defining a couple of terms. By conservative, I want to limit the scope to just the American political landscape. I also want to use the kind of modern definition of conservative, big C conservative, and generally at least a loose consensus of people that that are seen as fitting into that category, that description. And I want to use it as an umbrella that encompasses Republicans, constitutionalists, Tea Party people, libertarians, even maybe right-wing Democrats, anybody that is generally seen as either right of center, mainstream right-wing, far right-wing. Obviously, there's if you're a super conservative, you might see George Bush as a moderate, or Mitt Romney as a liberal. If you are living in Germany and looking at these people, you might see even most of the Democrats in the United States as conservatives. I'm going to limit it to what, let's say, the majority of people who follow politics in the United States would consider to be conservative, or at least right of center. And by important, I want to mean, first of all, how critical are you to getting Republicans elected? What kind of sway do you have over a conservative voting bloc? Secondly, how much are you listened to in a Republican conservative coalition? In other words, how much influence do you have within that movement? And third, how much of an impact do your policies have if they are implemented in terms of the real world? So, for example, if you are a conservative and your main goal is tort reform, that is probably going to be less consequential to most people than if you are a conservative and your main goal is making the county sheriff the highest authority in the country, for example. So, we're going to divide this into categories, and please let me know in the comment section what you think. So we're going to start with the seemingly obvious. Category number 1 is what I'm going to call the establishment leadership, and that is Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and Reince Priebus. So this is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, Congress makes the laws. Priebus is in charge of directing the Republican Party, and so it's hard to really argue that too many more people have more power or influence than these three. And even so much so that it might deserve some explanation as to why I would think that other people are as important as the leader of the House, leader of the Senate, leader of the Republican Party, but we'll see. So the second group I have are the neoconservatives. Is one of these people the most important conservative? In this list, of course, I have John McCain, Lindsey Graham, General Mattis. I'm just realizing right now how many of these guys have blue eyes. I never realized that before. And in this category, I'm also listing Jared Kushner. Here he is with Ivanka, who, by the way, God, she looks fantastic in this picture. But just because it looks as though that is the direction that sort of wing of the White House is headed right now, and Kushner seems to be allying at least with the neoconservatives and certainly has a lot of power. not all of these guys have as much power as, for example, the Speaker of the House or the Senate Majority Leader, but in terms of impact on the world, that's fairly obvious. If they get their way, there's a lot of bombs that are going to be dropped on a lot of countries, and that is potentially going to have a much bigger impact than what some of these groups are looking to do. My third category are the Tea Partiers. Is one of them the most important conservative? I could have listed a bunch of people, but I have Ted Cruz here. Dave Bratt, who is the Virginia congressman that defeated Eric Cantor a few years ago. Mark Meadows, who is currently the chairman of the Freedom Caucus. And why do I have these guys as important? Because as much power as Paul Ryan has as Speaker of the House, it appears that he is going to have difficulty passing certain bills through the Freedom Caucus. If they just stand up as a coalition, it looks as though they can block almost everything, and so maybe that's where the real power is. The fourth category I have are the Evangelicals, in which I will include Mike Pence. There's something wrong with the way that he smiles. Jerry Falwell Jr., Franklin Graham, Paula White, who is one of the most influential prosperity gospel preachers out there. She performed at Trump's inauguration. And so the reason that I have these guys is that they may not have the power of the previous people that I listed, but a lot of the reason that Republicans come out to vote are on evangelical issues. Evangelical voters show up at a rate which is far higher than most issues for either party. And so if you aren't able to win those elections, then you're not able to get in power. And so the evangelical movement has a ton of power and influence in this party right now, in this movement. Maybe another obvious one might be the donor class. Are these guys the most important conservatives just because this is where the money is? So there is Charles and David Koch, Robert Mercer, who's the hedge fund. No, that's Rob Gronkowski. There's Robert Mercer. The hedge fund billionaire that is in many ways financing Donald Trump. And there's Betsy DeVos and her brother Eric Prince. And there might be a ton of influence that those two have. And they are basically, Betsy got her position in part by being a giant bundler of money for the Republican Party. And so in this category, I'll also include Karl Rove and Grover Norquist, who are similar bundlers of a huge amount of Republican donations. And because of that, they certainly have great influence over the policies that get implemented in Washington. And so you can say, oh, well, Paul Ryan is really important, Mitch McConnell is really important, but if they didn't have the money backing them, then maybe they wouldn't be really as important. You might make the case that the donor class might be full of the most important conservatives, maybe even the most important people in the country in terms of determining policy. Then again, there are the CEOs, conservative CEOs, and some of them contribute to exclusively Republicans, some of them contribute to Democrats as well. But David Lazar of Halliburton, I have a tie that looks a little like that one. You have Rex Tillerson of ExxonMobil, of course, our current Secretary of State, Samuel Allen of it's the John Deere Company, and Jeff Bezos, who supports both parties but is kind of a libertarian. And you can make the case that, okay, well, the donors to the Republican Party, they provide all of the money, but it's really the businesses out there that are really instituting the major policies that are driving the economy, and so maybe they have more importance than just politics, because that really goes to the heart of our business, our economy. The seventh category I have are the media. You can say, well, as important as the conservative politicians and the money are, the people that really spin this entire thing into a industry that is able to continue to win are media figures, and this is kind of all over the place. Rush Limbaugh still appears to have quite a bit of influence in the party. You can make a very strong case that Rush Limbaugh might be the most important conservative over the last 30 years in just the way in which he has made sure that the conservative movement has maintained its orthodoxy and maintained sort of its support from its base. Bill O'Reilly, of course, I would have said Roger Ailes until very recently. He has lost a lot of his power, but Bill O'Reilly is kind of now the face of the Fox News channel, and Fox News is extremely important to conservatism in the United States. Stefan Molyneux, and I include him because there is a new generation of not necessarily conservative Republicans, but conservative sort of skeptics and rabble-rousers on the internet, and he is somebody that is bringing a lot of them into politics that wouldn't otherwise have been before. There's Steve Bannon, the former chief editor at Breitbart, who, if he gets power, there can be a whole lot of ramifications of that. I mean, if his power grows in the White House. And then Alex Jones, looking sullen there for whatever reason. Alex Jones may not have even the power of some of these other media figures, but it looks as though he has Trump's ear, and it looks as though he has, again, a very big media presence that has spawned a lot of other skeptics. And so one of these people may be the most important conservative. My eighth category I have is the judiciary, which you sort of maybe tend to forget about. But John Roberts, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, after you get a whole bunch of Republican legislation and it gets challenged, eventually the fact that they have a 5-4 majority in the Supreme Court is what keeps a lot of a hold in the entire operation. And so you may, in fact, believe that John Roberts is the most important conservative in the country just because of that. Anthony Kennedy, who, because he is the swing vote in a largely 4-4 court, he is, in many cases, the single person that is going to decide a lot of issues as to whether they come down on a conservative or a liberal or a moderate side. And then Neil Gorsuch, the reason I list him is because almost all of the conservatives that are on the court are older, and Gorsuch just got onto the court, and he may be on the court for 30 or 40 years, depending, and so maybe he is the most important conservative going forward. The ninth category I have are what I call the Democratic enablers, and this is Joe Manchin, the people at Third Way, which, if you don't know, is kind of a corporate-funded think tank that likes to take Democratic ideas and Republican ideas and sort of shimmy in between them and say that the real issue is we should meet in the third way in between the two parties. Well, if the Democrats are center-right and the Republicans are far-right, then Third Way is actually not advocating for the center, but advocating for something far to the right of center. The IDC, the Independent Democratic Conference, people in New York, now it's obviously that's just New York, but could this be a trend of Democrats that caucus with Republicans around the country, because Republicans have so many state houses right now that maybe it's the only way for them to be able to gain leverage and have some kind of say in the process. And then you have people like Claire McCaskill. McCaskill looks a little bit like Bonnie Tyler there, I think. People that, yeah, they're Democrats on certain issues, mostly social issues, but they agree with Republicans so much that not only is that extremely helpful for the Republican coalition just in terms of math, but it also gives bipartisan cover to a lot of these issues, which makes it much harder for things to swing to the left. And they're also taking up seats from perhaps more more principled, progressive Democrats that could be in those seats. Of course, those seats could go to Republicans as well. But so it is possible that the reason that the Republican Party is able to be so successful despite not really polling well with a lot of their ideas is that they are propped up by some of these Democratic enablers. And so the 10th category that I have, this is the ghost of Ronald Reagan. And I am including this as part of the present because we are still, in many ways, observing the Republican mindset from 1982, in which the prescription for the world was building up our military like crazy, cutting taxes on the rich, deregulation of industry, crushing unions. That may have made a little bit more sense 35 years ago. It doesn't make almost any sense right now in terms of refurbishing this current economy. And I also want to point out that the actual Ronald Reagan, in terms of his policies, was way, way, way less conservative than the ghost of Reagan is today in terms of the one that they follow. The actual Reagan increased taxes 17 times, expanded Social Security, gave blanket amnesty to 3 million illegal aliens. But the ghost of Reagan is this sort of incredible stalwart against taxes being raised and this incredibly right-wing conservative. And it is possible that he actually still has more power and importance than any conservative that is living today. And then, of course, category 11, the big guy, Donald Trump. And so I'm interested in hearing what you guys think, if any of you made it this far. Thanks very, very much for listening, and I hope that you will comment below. As for me, I'm going to go with Grover Norquist. All right, so here we go. Who is Grover Norquist? He's the most important conservative. He is the most important conservative. Thank you.